Life as a sport, a unique training approach. Daniel Palacios, fitness trainer, the concierge of calorie burn, the prince of promotion, and the duke of demonstration. And that's straight from his Instagram. So in this episode, Daniel Palacios reveals the passion behind his training philosophy and promoting equipment and other companies that align with his beliefs and providing his clients with the best tools and resources to enhance their performance and overall well-being. Equipment that not only meets his high standards, but also offers innovative features and benefits, which is how I found him. We talk about his gym in Florida that is not just a typical exercise facility, but a place where he can create a unique and immersive experience for his clients. Daniel describes how he has gone above and beyond to acquire state-of-the-art equipment that is not commonly found in other gyms. He believes that by offering these cutting-edge tools, he can provide his clients with a competitive edge and help them achieve their fitness goals more efficiently. Daniel's creative routines are a result of his extensive knowledge and experience in the field of strength and conditioning. He explains that he constantly seeks inspiration from various sources, including other trainers, scientific research, and his own personal experiences. Now, starting as a unique training environment on a farm was not without its challenges for Daniel. He shares the hardships he faced in the early stages, including securing funding, finding the right location, and building a client base. Daniel's determination and hard work paid off as his gym on the farm quickly gained popularity, and this was without a roof. He attributes his success to his ability to work creating a welcoming and supportive community where his clients feel motivated and inspired to achieve their fitness goals. He also emphasizes the importance of building strong relationships with his clients, understanding their individual needs, and tailoring his training programs accordingly. Daniel's Gym on the Farm has become a thriving hub for fitness enthusiasts and athletes alike. His dedication to providing top-notch equipment, innovative routines, and a supportive environment has earned him a reputation as a highly regarded and respected strength and conditioning coach. He continues to promote the importance of holistic training, mental health support, and lifelong learning in the fitness industry. You can find Dan at livekinetically.com. The link is below, and on Insta at livekinetically. And again, that link's below. Thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former New Zealand Special Forces operator, subject matter expert from hownottodie.com.au. And you're listening to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by these guys, mystate.com, the ultimate daily formula for optimum hormone health, stress management, energy, and performance. 100% natural and clinically proven ingredients, it provides everything you need to raise your game in a convenient, gut-friendly capsule. Links for my former shows are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to my guest all the way from USA this morning, Daniel Palacios. Great to see you.
Hey man, how you doing? It's great to be on. Can't wait to get through this chat here and have some fun learning about each other.
Hey man, you got the energy, which is great because it's early morning here. I appreciate our short chat just before we hit record. And I've got a different shirt on today. I always wear the Warfighter Athletic, but you know, when someone gets followed by Pat Mack, a friend and a former guest of the show, I thought I'd put the Basic Do stuff on. So there we go.
Yeah, I mean, I've been dealing with Pat for a little while now, and great guy. And obviously, it's a lot of fun to just watch him go. How do you guys actually know each other?
Hey, it's just with the background. He was probably one of him and maybe another guy called John McPhee, a couple of the two Delta Force Sergeant Majors that first came on the show when I went down this sort of veteran path, getting a lot of them, or the veterans on. We've got a small world with the Special Forces world. And what I loved about Pat was his humility, and he has more brevity than I do. So I just reached out to him on socials. Hey, would you like to come on the show? He goes, yep.
Yep. That's about right.
Yeah. And so we did the show. It was great. And I was lucky enough to stand in for him and then be a guest on the show of his as well. And it's just a small world of like-minded people, which is exactly what connected me to you, Daniel. So I do the intro prior to this, so the listeners have already heard what you do. But from your words, what is it that you do over there, fitness wise, and over there in Miami?
Well, we're actually at a place called Davie, about 25 minutes directly west of Fort Lauderdale,
Oh
which is
wow.
flooded right now, by the way, and about 45 minutes northwest of Miami. And the facility you see here is a direct result of all the work that I've been doing really for the last 5 years.
Yeah,
And
I
it
love that.
it really came and stemmed from my work as a strength conditioning coach. I started off really in 2011, with a mindset for performance rehab. Really general fitness wasn't what I wanted to be my shtick, but that's kind of how it started to take on a life of its own. And really, that's the bread and butter when it comes to business. But regardless, what it comes down to for me, from a training perspective, is that life is a sport, right?
I
We
love that.
all, generally speaking, have this frame of bones and tissues and sinews that, for the most part, are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Barring the whole male, female, genetic differences there. When it comes to interacting with our environment on a daily basis, there are some variations there as well. But in the end, we've all got to learn to squat, lunge, hinge, twist, walk, run, sprint, and apply those in different ways depending on our environment and our daily life and work tasks. And that's a lot of what I emphasize my training on. And it's led me down some really fun paths as far as acquiring a lot of this equipment. Everything you see in this facility was a result of me taking on a daily, pretty much constant effort for the last 5 years to help companies like these guys educate and promote their products, educate their audiences, and promote the products through that education and through a strength conditioning coach who has at least some level of know-how in the field, right? And what a lot of people don't realize when it comes to the innovative equipment space is it's really easy to just look at something at face value and go, oh, it's a gimmick, right? My goal is to always look at any of these things with an open mind, and really try to hone in on what is it I think this thing can really do, and who can it do it for, and how is that person potentially going to connect with it in a positive way that takes them to their next step in their training, whatever that training is. So
Yeah.
that's been a lot of my goal along this entire path, and that's how I've essentially built this entire facility on that sweat equity. And there were some other more serendipitous sort of divine intervention moments along the way that I could tell you, but we could spend all day talking about those, buddy.
Oh man, I love what you do. So many fitness trainers online or and showing their content, but yours stood out immediately, and reminded me so much of what Pat Mack does. And if anybody hasn't seen that, you just check out the links down there. Um, you've got innovative exercise ideas, so you're creative. You've got innovative exercise equipment, which you spoke of, which is brilliant. Um, but just going back to what you started that conversation off with, every person out there has to squat, lunge, bend, twist, throw, run, sprint, walk, all those things. That reminds me of the Paul Chek background that I started with, which is his primal movements. And it was so different than the gym, and literally you had to do that if you're going to go and kill an animal for and forage and so on. You had to physically do those things. And you're right that anybody has to do that, and life is a sport. Um, I'm intrigued about your gym and all the equipment you got there, because it's little bit more like my small gym. I don't train clients; I just train myself. But these innovative things, it made me think of the Banff Hammer. I interviewed the creator of that. What a nice guy, but what a cool piece of equipment. It's not every time. Awesome. For the listeners, you see Dan's, I think, going to get one of the Banff Hammers. See what he's got.
We got a few of those here too.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome.
There it is. Sean is one of my favorite human beings on the planet.
Isn't he nice?
Yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah, man. That's exactly it, right? So, what does a hammer allow us to do? How does it allow us to train in unique ways? How does it allow us to load those primal movement patterns in ways that we wouldn't typically load them, so that should we experience those loads on a daily basis at some point in our life, our body is at least somewhat prepared to handle that dynamic shift or that sudden shift, or it's just straight up work that we got to do. I can't tell you how many of my clients, suddenly a yard work project comes up and they're going, oh man, I had to use a pickaxe this weekend, and I'm really glad we do BAMF hammer work now. So,
well, that reminds me. I remember when I was my background's pretty diverse. I need a whiteboard and crayons for that one, but I did exercise rehab in a clinic, which is probably different than the Americans' terminology, but rehabilitating people with injury with exercise. And I remember this woman coming in. She wanted an emergency appointment with maybe the physio there, because she'd been painting and sanding, or sanding and painting a house all day, and she's done 2 days of work and she's locked up her thoracic spine. What an example of someone who's not fit to function for what she wanted to do, and she was an average person in average shape.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's so many of those situations I can count up over the years, that as I gained more experience as a coach and trained, and I had a really great starting point with some really amazing coaches, guys who worked for the Miami Dolphins and who were prominent in the field, from the college levels, Division I sports and football and athletics, and rehab, orthopedic surgeons, physical therapists. We're just a really great community because of the nature of this area that we live in. There's so many athletes, and as such, there's a lot of really high level practitioners here. So I got that as my starting point for training, and that was the foundation I had to work with, and built on that from there through experience mostly, and saw all those situations over the years. Like you said, one of my clients, she had a really bad bout of plantar fasciitis. Even though we would do foot and ankle, we would pound that stuff into the pavement, but she very suddenly got brand new shoes, brand new sneakers, and went to Disney for a week, and then walked around in Disney for the better part of 5 days straight, which was a sudden massive uptick in her overall walking volume. And that's what ended up resulting in the plantar fasciitis. And so on that same note, though, all of those instances where something like that happened were what really kicked me out the door to start seeking out and searching better, more efficient ways to help people get beyond those things, right? And create a better level of resilience and responsiveness in the body to not only recover from those things, but recover from them faster and recover from them better than when they started, and perform at a higher and higher level the longer you train, and retain a lot of that high level performance as well, even as you get into your later years. And I have luckily a really broad spectrum of clientele I've worked with over the years, including people into their 90s. And I'll tell you right now, some of my 70, 80 something year olds have some of the most grit that I've seen. I've got a 74-year-old female client who I've been training for years, who's doing sets of 5 pull-ups at a time.
Wow.
And on the rings. And then I've got people who are trying to become police officers, who are just starting out on their fitness journey, who can barely hang for more than 10 seconds, in a dead hang. So it's a testament to what can be done in a relatively short period of time, as far as the grand scheme of life is concerned, if you dedicate your life to some form of training on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of my approach and mindset when it comes to training across the board, whether that's athletes or laymen.
Yeah, brilliant. I like that, creating a higher level of resilience, because that's really what you're trying to do. I remember in the Paul Chek philosophy, the wrong word, principles, I guess, would be, I specifically remember he would be talking about a builder. And if the builder was only strong enough to do his 8 hours of work, when he did overtime, he's now pushing into fatigue. He's now not conditioned for that. So he would want to be conditioned for 2 hours extra work in some way. It was just a nice example to have a bit of reserve in the tank. And the same thing as you were talking about, saying a higher level of resilience. That female didn't have enough in the tank to handle walking around for a little bit longer in the days in slightly different shoes. That's a really clever way of looking at it. So I'll just go back to Pat and tie that one in a bow. When someone, and we've got some very interesting mutual friends that follow you. You got Pat McNamara, Tony Blair, Bill Maeda. That says a lot to me, Daniel. Um, so you said you've worked with Pat in the past. Have you? What's gone on there?
So actually, our meeting was very similar to yours. Just in the realm of what I was trying to do, especially in the early days of the pandemic, and branching out further into my work with tactical athletes across the board.
Yep.
I just wanted to provide some level of high level support to tactical athletes. So I approached Pat on Instagram about getting involved with just doing a little podcast type thing myself. I don't have a
Nice.
prominent podcast. It's not something I really focus on, but I do like interviewing and talking and learning with people, and having that sort of constant digital footprint is always a good pretext to work with,
Yep.
to have that interaction with someone. And of course, Pat was way generous with his time and energy to have given me even the time of day. So I'm super grateful to him. But through that, we started interacting on the level of getting him some of the tools that I've worked with over the years, and getting some things out to him that you'll see he's using. So like the Aqua training bag, the Cinder Fit blocks, a couple of those things I introduced him to, and now he's working with another amazing product called the Core Strength One, which is sort of a picnic table on wheels
Yeah.
with multiple steps along the way, and then push-up bars on the other side, various attachment points. Highly functional piece of equipment. But
Yeah.
he, like you said, he's a pretty open and forward-thinking guy when it comes to his training, for a number of reasons, because of what I would imagine you guys have experienced in the field over the years. For me, tools like that are all about creating opportunity to replicate real life situations. So, something like the Aqua training bag, right? Number one, it's really great for it reducing the impact on the hand, wrist, and elbow.
Yep.
Number two, for a fighter, understanding the level of tension they have to apply, the level of force they have to apply in order to hit the sweet spot to, say, hit a liver. It's actually a really good feedback system, having a bag that has a little bit of squish to it, but then also a little bit of a stopping point.
It really is. And
And
on that one, Dan, I popped down and saw one of the top boxers here in Australia. He wanted some How Not to Die information, which was really cool. And he talked about the Aqua bag. So he trains Olympic level athletes. He was a professional boxer. He greases it up. He puts Vaseline all over it, because
yeah,
when you're actually in the fight, you're never going to land it like it is on the day, because the guy's sweaty inside. So another interesting take on that one, in this sweet spot that you talk about. You got to be so on your game.
yeah, having that level of feedback and realism
Mm.
in a reactive environment, right, is what that provides. And then something like the Core Strength One, it's got steps, man. Like, how many people just get injured walking up and down steps on a regular daily basis,
Yeah.
right? Or they can't even do it. Their legs can't even support their own weight moving at a forward upward angle with hand support at their sides,
Yeah.
and their knees are killing them, right? So something like that for me is huge for that locomotive aspect of doing a step up, and knowing how to do it in various environments with various types of loads. So we'll do all kinds of just body weight based stepping, and understanding the proper arm and swing pattern to coordinate that movement. But
Yep.
then we'll also do that carrying something in one hand, or carrying it on your shoulder, or carrying it in the front, or carrying it on the back, because those are all different patterns that you may experience. Even walking up and down sideways, right? Sidestepping down. Something like that is just, you're not going to find that in a traditional gym. And once you have something like that available, it really opens up the doors to train in a whole new spectrum of movement patterns and loads, right?
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what we go out of our way to integrate into the rapid tactical response programs that I create, or the general rehab programs that I create for people, depending on their needs. And those more often than not, actually, those worlds collide.
I just lost your audio just there, after you said those worlds collide.
Sorry about that. I had
Yeah.
a call come in. What was that?
But you're so right, and that's what I loved about the rehab side of things, because the rehab also applied you could apply that principle to preventative rehab and then to performance enhancement. And exactly what you're saying there, you can use some of that tactical athlete stuff for the general population. They intermix. And it was a great thing you said. Life is a sport at the start of the show, and we all need to do those primal movements. So you don't have to go running with body armor and be rotated and trying to pull the trigger. But you still may need to do that basic movement, and maybe you've got a kid in one hand, a baby, or you've got a shopping bag. Those are actual real movements.
Yeah, and I would argue. I was just when I did a little bit of an Instagram live right before this, I was talking a little bit about that. I would even argue that for the tactical athlete, because they get so much exposure to being in their gear, and the time frames and the level of stress is so high, the body essentially gets trained into a sort of a feedback loop of stress, tensioning, right, behaving a certain way. And so when you have all of that added load of gear and helmets and night vision and whatever else you have to carry along the way, that's putting over 100 pounds of stress on your head, neck, shoulders, and torso, and then you're here for hours or you're kneeling down for hours, that's essentially training your body to hold a static position for hours and hours and hours, and it creates a lot of unnecessary tension here. Well, what is at the time necessary, right? But once you're out of the field, right, even when it's out of the altercation, whatever that looks like, right now you're at a resting point, or what should be a resting point but actually isn't because you're in enemy territory. You really don't get to relax, right? And your guard stays up. You can't live life in the red, though. Eventually you got to come back to the green zone. And that's a lot of what we try to do, is create an environment in training that gives you the best possible, most efficient ways to shift out of that red zone, get back into that objective performance state, and then know how to throttle it back up and throttle it back down when you need to. Because a lot of these tactical athletes and operators, military, law enforcement, first responders, they never gain the tools and the knowledge or learn anything practical enough that they can apply instantly and deployably to shift out of that state. And so they just constantly live there. And you'll never get the gas back in the tank that way. You're constantly drained because your body is always getting those huge adrenaline dumps, and it doesn't know how to cope with it any other way, right? So you just learn to live in the red all the time. And I would argue that, again, tactical athletes in particular, and average people, need to learn to shift back into that calm, objective state and have positive anchors and coping mechanisms, and like practical tools that you can use. Breathing, right? Various self-manipulation points. There are all kinds of pressure point systems and movement systems that allow people to do that pretty quickly and efficiently. And it's also a trainable response. That's the other side of things. If the stress state, the high level stress state, is trainable and repeatable to a place where you just stay there, it's also trainable to reverse it. And that's a lot of what we try to go out of our way to do when it comes to high level operators, and getting them to a place where their body can actually recover. Because that's the other thing, right? You mentioned, this person who had to work overtime and their body couldn't handle that. That again becomes a trainable state that becomes repeated. And now not only do you not have gas in the tank, but you can't even get the gas back in the tank because the body is so tense and constricted and stressed all the time that right down to your digestive abilities and your abilities to intake any kind of nutrients or even recover. You're not sleeping well. Even if you do eat well, that doesn't mean the nutrients are necessarily getting in and getting to where they need to be. You're surviving, but you're not thriving. And that sounds like such a blasé thing to say, or cliche thing to say, but it's really true, and it is possible to shift your body back to that place where it can perform at a high level when it needs to, and then you can actually dial it back down and get back to a place where you can recover well from the high level performance you have to apply, or the training that you have to apply on a consistent basis. And that's another thing, is that so many people, especially in the general fitness world, are constantly being taught more is more, right? Burn the engine harder all the time, right? The grind, you gotta live in the grind all the time. No, man, if you're constantly living in the grind and you're never giving your body the opportunity to recover, you are not going to gain ground. In fact, you're going to get back to an overtrained state where you really can't recover, and then your body's going to start fighting back on you. So it's something that I caution against, especially when it comes to the average person, because a lot of people, don't actually take an off-season approach or a stress modulation approach to their training. They're constantly training high intensity year round, 5-6 days a week, sometimes trying to lose that 5 pounds. And it's like, you're not going to get there that way. You got to give your body the chance to actually come down from it all.
It really, the whole thing you were saying there, Daniel, was, to me, says balance. And I am the first person to say everything in moderation is absolutely wrong. No, not at all. But balancing up the input versus the output. I had a New Zealand SAS guy that I wrote an exercise program for, a friend of mine, and he's way more aggressive than me. He would go in and do his exercise program in the middle of the day. He worked for a top sports team as a motivational person there, and he would do his workout. And as soon as he finished his last set, he's on his back, on the bench, legs up, doing box breathing, because there's no need to battle anymore. It's battle, battle, battle during the workout. And after the last rep, that's it, because he needs to recover. He needs to go back to a thinking process. He needs to do all the things. And I just thought to myself, there's that balance. You talked about tactical athlete, and I'll come back to that of where that came into fruition for you. But I'd like to ask you the question that I asked Rebecca Rouse as well. Recovery. It's not a throwaway word, but it's maybe a not well known word. For your average clients, what are the recovery things they do you recommend for them? And then what about for the more tactical or actually athletes out there? What recovery modalities do you recommend for them?
Well, what does actually recovery even mean, right?
Yeah.
And really what it comes down to for our bodies, from a very general perspective, again, right? Physiology, anatomy, and biology when it comes to the average human being, versus a high level athlete versus, tactical athletes, what have you. Essentially, our ability to recover is dictated by our genetics. So there's that, right? Some people are just better at recovering than others. If you don't understand how your body recovers genetically and what its ability to respond to what your body perceives as high intensity activity is different
Great.
from one person to the next, depending on your genetics and your level of conditioning. So anyone can condition themselves into a higher level of performing state. And then what does it actually look like to recover? So for me, educating people on what recovery means and what are the primary aspects that we sort of all universally have to apply to that recovery comes down to energy systems and, our body's ability to utilize nutrients in order to repair the tissues. What is the time required to repair those tissues? And how does our body actually do it? Well,
So
it comes down to blood flow.
So you're defining recovery, which is awesome. And I always have to translate for the listeners in some way. You're really talking about that base of nutrition, rest, and sleep. Those are the big ones, right?
Rest and digest, baby. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, exactly. Rest and digest it. You got the ice bath and all this other stuff that people do out there, and it looks pretty, but what about that person that's sleeping 5 hours a night and eating 2 meals a day because they're on the run? It doesn't work, does it?
Right. And yeah, and actually maybe that does work for that person. There's all kinds of, we can go back and forth about intermittent fastings and all these different things. It depends on what kind of program that person is applying, what their energy needs are on a daily basis, what are their training needs. We can get really deep on that stuff. But what it comes down to again is rest and digest, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to make sure that your body has the necessary fuel to do the thing, whatever that thing is. Right. For me, I was just back squatting. Right. So if I don't have the necessary carbohydrates in my system to do that, the necessary electrolytes to do that, then my body's going to tap into energy sources that it doesn't need to be tapping into. So by the time I'm done with that bout of exercise, it's now more stressed than it should have been going in. And now I've got to play sort of catch up on, making sure I get the necessary nutrients and calming my body down from that. it comes down to, programming a proper cool down period, like your buddy who, immediately goes into box breathing, shifting out of that intentionally applied sympathetic dominance state, right?
Yeah.
I got under the weight, my body felt the intensity of it. I've got to come out of that, and now I've got to recover, right? Uh, breathing is a huge one, right?
Yes.
Nasal breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, getting actively taking oxygen into the system so that the oxygen is going to permeate all those tissues, pump through all those tissues, and more importantly, the nasal breathing is going to bring nitric oxide into the system, which is going to help to better open up all the capillaries and blood vessels, what have you, which is going to then continue that cycle of moving new blood to areas where a lot of lactic acid and waste product is building up. So that's why I say it comes essentially down to blood flow, right? Because that's your entire nutrient delivery system. But if you remain in that stressed state, then the blood flow doesn't work the way it's supposed to, right? And even though your heart's pumping, that doesn't mean that the neurons are all going to be firing the way they need to. So another simple system that I help a lot of people learn about, it's a system called RPR, Reflexive Performance Reset, is where I alluded to manual manipulation.
Yes, you did.
So that was created by a couple gentlemen named Cal Dietz, who's an Olympic coach for the Olympic hockey team, the U.S. hockey team, and then another coach, J.L. Holdsworth. And the very most basic aspects of that are, again, nasal breathing, belly breathing, utilizing that as a way of helping your body to cope with direct contact, right? Self-applied rubbing points. So if you're in the military and law enforcement, you know what this thing is.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
Sternum rub is a really good way to wake someone up and open up those tissues around your lungs. From there, you'll go into the diaphragm and actively work through the diaphragm, breathing in through the nose, right? Helping to desensitize the tissues around your diaphragm, which is helping you expand and contract around your rib cage and your lungs.
Yep.
You move from there down into the psoas, right, just below the belly button, and actually applying direct pressure to the nerves around your psoas and around your lower abdominals, what attaches essentially your torso to your hips.
Yeah.
Still breathing while you do that, and then applying pressure to the back of the head, the nape of the neck, and the skull, as well as this point right here. Again, if you're in military and law enforcement, you probably know about applying pressure there, right? I can do that really hard, and I can probably have someone else do it really hard because I do this every single day when I wake up, middle of the day, when I'm stressed and just kind of like feel myself shutting off mentally and just going into go mode. And between every set of every exercise during my workout to continually reprogram my body to get back into performance state as quickly and efficiently as possible. And more importantly, for a coach, it's a hands-off approach. And for the client, for the person who's applying it to themselves, it's a self-empowered way of knowing that you're shifting your body back into a high performance state. So the muscles are literally firing in the patterns they're designed to fire in for high performance. When it comes down to high performance, it's glute firing pattern, right?
Yep.
It's being able to generate blood flow and move blood, lactic acid, and nutrients throughout my system as I'm continually stressing my body out. If I'm not doing that well during the workout, I'm going to gas out faster, right? And so what I've continually seen and what all these other RPR, reflexive performance reset coaches have seen is really, really impressive shifts in not only instantly shifting a high level of performance in an individual over the course of a training program and, or a training session itself, right? From literally one squat to the next, but also creating an environment of self-empowerment among individuals on a team so that everybody cohesively understands they're working at a higher level as well. So it does have this sort of groupthink aspect to it that says, man, we feel stronger because we know we're stronger because we're performing at a higher level. And there's a confidence that comes with that as well. And you know how important that is in a team environment. When everybody can trust one another to carry their load, we can all work and do our jobs as individuals so the entire machine moves together as a unit. And that's a really important part of it.
but you were talking about it from a physical point of view, because special forces, we use our mind power, our mental toughness to do that. But how good is it? It's clearly a rhetorical question. When your body's not holding you back, I love that. So your body's allowed. What I love what you said there, Dan, is desensitizing. You didn't use trigger points or releasing or anything. You used desensitizing, which I think was a great terminology. Um, Reminded me of Dan Millman, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and the massage techniques he spoke about in his semi-fictitious book. And Dan Millman was a Olympic level trampolinist. It is a sport, and he was talking about
Oh,
the
believe me, hey man, you want to talk about high level performing and like using a high yield, low impact way of training to jump.
yeah.
Olympic trampolinists are some of the highest jumpers on flat ground that I've ever seen.
Oh wow, wow, that's amazing.
So there's an aspect to that involves a lot of high intensity force production with low intensity impact,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And this person is learning to spring and use their fascial system and integrating their entire biomechanical system through fascially driven movement to be able to move higher, and they're not jumping around on a hard ground all the time.
Well, I'm glad you helped me out there with formulating my summary of what you did with the RPR. Really, by desensitizing that tissue, allowing that fascia to move. And there's Chris
Yeah,
McDougall from Born to Run, but more importantly, um, his Heroes book, Running Amongst Heroes, or whatever the name of it, the title of it is. The fascia of a body is just almost limitless. You see these parkour people using fascial movements rather than some little, even a big well, Chris McDougall is a big guy. He's 6'2" or something. He's bigger than I am. I'm more muscly than he is, but he'll be able to do stuff much better because he's using that fascia, which is the way we're supposed to move. One last thing that jumped in my mind when you're talking about desensitizing those tissues and performance from one to the next. And I've asked many surgeons this. Little known fact is every person under anesthetic has normal flexibility range, normal movement range. So you get an 80-year-old female on her back and take her hamstring back, her leg back to 90 degrees or further.
absolutely. Yeah.
So if we're limiting ourselves by having, I mean, that was amazing what you'd shown with the diaphragm and then the psoas and the occipitals. If you're limiting yourself because you're literally tight up there, what a brilliant self-empowering way to do it. I'm going to look into it. I'll put the notes down for it, but really clever, really clever. I did
And
say
let me
I'd
be
come back.
clear, that's no invention of my own. I've just tested it copiously and was lucky enough to learn about it from Coach JL and those guys, and and again have had opportunity after opportunity to apply it to any and every type of individual that you can think, from children to elderly adults, prehab for therapy and surgery, as well as post rehab for operations, and then tactical athletes, high level elite athletes of all kinds, who are people who are pretty intuitive about their body and go, man, I really feel the difference from one moment to the next.
And that's
And
why
the
that's
more
why
I do it, the more I feel like I'm in that state.
that's why I said really clever. I wasn't like it's not a clever thing to make. Of course it is, but really clever that you didn't just look at it and go, "That's a gimmick." You got it, and you tried it on yourself, and you tried on other people. That's what I'm meaning. And clearly, that is almost the philosophy of what you got going on there. The principle you're going. I mean, was it the inertia wave bands?
Love them.
Saw the videos. I was going, surely it can't be better than a battle rope. Got them over there, paid the money, and they're brilliant. And what an innovative piece of equipment. But still, people persist with battle ropes as compared to those. But let's get these things over. Let's get that big hammer you got and try the thing. I was using yesterday for I guess in the day you'd call them wrist curls, but in a hammer action in a neutral plane. So really clever what you're doing. I do want to circle back to tactical athlete. How did you get
Yeah.
involved that way? And that's really why we're connected. Um, I saw you, running shooting drills in the gym and so on. But what was your uh, journey for tactical athlete programming, training, explanation, whatever you want to title that.
Yeah, I mean, I call my program Rapid Tactical Response, and I use those words very specifically for that reason,
Yep.
which is to say that the tactical athlete, whoever they are, and whatever particular skill they're applying, it's going to have to be rapidly applied. And
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer that it's a responsive situation, not a reactive situation.
Yes.
We and I use that verbiage specifically for that reason, is that I want to teach people to respond, not just react,
Yep.
right? And
Tony
that can be a
Blair would
quick
love you for
response,
that
but
one,
it's a
Daniel.
focused and intentional response, right? Um, and so that whole thing really came from, again, my time early on working with one of the facilities down here that's literally right around the corner from me now. But we were approached by the Broward Police Academy
Oh,
to
yes.
help them create a program centered around their testing protocols, which are actually quite stringent. And most people don't know that that it's one of the highest level standards in probably the world as far as general law enforcement testing going into becoming a police officer. The entire hiring process can take anywhere from 6 weeks to a year.
Yep.
So you have this really crazy chasm between maybe the time frame that you get hired by an agency and enter the academy to becoming a police officer, or you have this really short time frame to do it. And again, we're getting people who maybe walk into the gym and can't do a push-up even if I put a gun to their head. Not that I'm
Yeah.
going to do that,
Yeah.
but and then suddenly they have to be able to do 10 push-ups to get hired, plus several other drills, including an obstacle course and running 800 meters in certain periods of time, things like that. And then if they should pass that testing relatively quickly, they could very well end up in academy where they now have to do what's called the profile test, which is for 100%, 12 pull-ups, 60 push-ups in 2 minutes, 85 sit-ups in 2 minutes, several other exercises called treadmills, squat thrusts, bend and twists, run an 800-meter in 3 minutes or less, and then an obstacle course in a minute and 25 or less. So if they get hired in that short period, that
That's a
short window
long
of
gap.
having passed this gateway test to now suddenly having to be in this academy, they could be
Yeah.
here and get absolutely housed and get
Yep.
canned in the process.
Yep.
So a lot of the agencies, depending on who they're being hired by, will require minimum one passing score, and most of them will require two, which means that they have the course of 5.5 months to go from where they started, which is only a few push-ups and sit-ups, to now suddenly doing all this stuff at minimum of 75% on the test, which is still pretty high level numbers for someone who isn't capable of that starting out. So
Yeah.
Our goal with that program was to create a program that suited the needs for someone who needed to prepare for eventually being hired, as well as suiting the needs for someone who's already in the process of academy and then beyond, right?
Yep.
Because it's a very different mindset to go through boot camp and testing and all this other stuff, assessment mindset, to now actually being on the job and actually living the lifestyle.
Yep.
And so we had to create this program that sort of fit all of those bills. And eventually that evolved out into me doing that myself, because I stopped working for that facility. And for the last really 7 years, I've been the primary strength conditioning consultant to the Broward Police Academy, and the only person they've ever let come in who's an outsider, who's not a police officer, to do that. And that was a program that was started off with a guy who's a legend in the field, a guy named Joe Hess, who designed that program in the 70s.
Wow.
So it hasn't changed, but it was also specifically designed to suit the needs, the movements, the requirements, the physicality of a police officer. And so that's what a lot of the training started to stem from. And, all things being equal, maybe all of the tests don't necessarily apply, right? Or they aren't the most balanced way of testing somebody, but at least there's a standard too, right?
Yeah.
Because we need to have physical standards. And that's what I tell a lot of these police officers who are trying to get into this academy and trying to become an officer. It's like, look, man, I don't care how physically fantastic and genetically gifted you are to do this, that you're passing this thing with flying colors. If you don't love this job and want to be a public servant, there's no amount of high level performance you can do in this academy, and there's certainly no paycheck that they can give you that's worth what it is you're about to go and do. You'd better love it, and you better want to do it at the utmost level of excellence and professionalism, because the climate in this industry is changing, right? And it's an industry, whether you like it or not. And that's a lot of the mindset side of it, the psychology side of it that I've learned just over the years, experientially by working with so many officers, is that this is something that your training has to reflect a high level of stress management skills,
Yep.
and a high level of emotional intelligence skills, because you're going to be in situations very rapidly where you have to respond intentionally. That's where that entire terminology came from. And so, a lot of the programming that's gone into the RPR and the ways that we train is specifically calculated towards that mindset. And starting from the time they even engage with me saying, hey, look, I want to become a police officer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, where are you at with this testing? Okay, where are you at with your training? Take a look at some of these videos, right? Start doing some of these things from now. Start thinking about some of these concepts of how it is your body manages stress as it currently does, and how you need to retrain it to do so, so that you're not just physically ready, but mentally and emotionally ready to take on this load, because it's a heavy one. It's a big burden, man.
It is. I was a police officer after I came to Western Australia. Just for a couple of years. It was actually a lot easier. It's easy to come down from a high level and then be able to drop down. I found that quite refreshing, because you got a chance to use your words. You weren't always on the trigger and doing the things. But
well, again, desensitizing, right? You were desensitized to an extremely high level of daily exposure to life and death, versus situations you perceive personally as, oh, this is nothing. Yeah. You're a peach to deal with. You're not trying to blow me up today. Great. Let's
exactly.
talk.
Exactly. You nailed it. Not many people comprehend that, because you can step up easily because you're experienced to that, and stepping down is easy. But you nailed it there with policing, which I love that you did. You said two things there. Really, you're in the service of others. You're helping people. And I just spoke with Rick Hogg from Warhog Tactical just the other day. We're in the service of others. And policing is a mind game, but if you're not physically conditioned to go and run after that guy or girl, as you're saying, it's there, but they all intermix. And then we were sort of 20 minutes ago being able to switch that off afterwards. You've chased that guy down. Now, will you make a responsive decision, or will you be like the four moron cops, I think 2 months ago? One guy starts punching the guy on the ground, so all of them mirror what he's doing, which is not a response. That's just
all it's doing is escalating the situation, right? So
exactly. They're not even thinking. Right. They're switched off. Yeah.
Right. And that's a lot of what I'm talking about. And look, I mean, a lot of that also comes down to, it's easy when you talk about tactical athletes or, law enforcement, first responders, to talk about the extreme situations, right? And jump to those as the main aspects that cause a high level of stress in anyone. But really what it comes down to is the daily stress, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting there in a car, eating garbage, getting stupid calls coming in, getting pressure from, the sergeant or the chief, or that person you just don't like because you just don't like them. And the moment they walk in the room, your entire body goes rigid and they don't rub you the right way. That's the more chronic exposure that catches up with people. And I mean, 60% of law enforcement injuries are non-contact, non-job related when it comes to, physical altercations of any kind. And where does that come from? That comes from the daily stressors of just having to have the endurance, the physical endurance and the mental and emotional endurance to do the job every single day, 12 hours a day, and, have ideally a minimum baseline of mobility, flexibility, strength, conditioning to just be able to be in a car driving with your body twisted this way on a computer half the time and a gun on your hip and all that gear on your torso. There's that, right? And then there's
people don't realize the stressors. Now I'm just going to shift here because my partner's got another show to do with this this setup. So I'm going to shift here, so the viewer's going to see a bit of a different thing. But we can keep the talk going, but most people don't realize the stressors on a police officer, on a firefighter, on all those different people. I remember Czech was saying firefighting is the hardest job in the world on a human. You've got to, so close your eyes, put weighted boots on, put a huge hose on the outside, cover them up in 20 kilos of gear, and then not allow them to breathe properly. That's one example. What I'm getting towards is special forces guys, cops, firefighters, we're expected to go and do a job that, for instance, chasing a bad guy down, they've got no gear on, they're running as hard as they can, and that cop's got 10 kilos of gear, maybe 7 kilos of gear, and he's been doing that all day, and he's supposed to be better than that other person. The firefighter's supposed to go in and pull another person out of a building, and that's the job. And you've got to be able to do that, and it might not happen for months, and then when you do, literally rapidly, it may have to be tactically, you have to do it immediately. I'll give one example. This was unreal. I was driving home one night from the fire station. So I finished at 6 p.m. at night, 7 p.m. at night, driving home, one corner to go to the house. I look out the window and I see orange. And I did a double take because I thought it was a bushfire here. And it was a house on fire. I went, you're kidding. Long story short, I stopped the car, got the people behind me to call the emergency services. I still had my gear on, my boots and my blues. I just put a firefighter jacket on, my gloves, and I ran. And I was running as hard as I could for about probably about 250 meters. And then I had to do these things. So it goes from 0 to 100 miles an hour immediately. And that's what I think a tactical athlete is. But I love what you've got there, rapid tactical response. It's literally what you have to be doing.
Yeah.
Man, I'm looking forward to checking out that program and seeing what's around it. I love that you've got it over there. A lot of the people I interviewed, one of the guys that runs BUDS programs for the SEALs with the Warrior Calling, they're there for the selection process, but you're there for the long game, which is different again, and that's super important and really sort of sums up what you're doing organically, the whole thing there, the athlete as a whole.
Yeah, and the person, right?
Yeah.
There's a human being in that husk, in that tired old husk, and that's the thing is, my guess, and I guess my hope would be that all of the coaches who deal in all of these realms, right? But particularly when it comes to tactical athletes, because the job that's being done is so important across the board. That these are people who are genuinely trying to help the world be a better place in a number of ways for a number of, to a number of ends, that all of the people who deal with the training and prepare the training would start to think more this way. And yes, there's an intensity that's required. There's a detachment that's required to some extent, but eventually you've got to realize that this person is no longer going to be operating at this level, right? And they're more than just a commodity that we're dumping millions of dollars into, or hundreds of thousands of dollars into preparing them and training them and feeding them and all that different stuff. Eventually that person's going to have to stop doing that job. And what is their life going to look like on the other end of that? Will they have the necessary tools to recover from that? Or are you just going to leave them in the ether trying to figure out how to do it on their own? If we have more coaches who are aware of these things and that there are ways to train at a high intensity level, what is required to prepare you to do the testing and do the job can be integrated at a more emotionally intelligent, more psychologically intelligent, and more physiologically intelligent approach and way, and it can still be just as efficient as the other training that you're already doing. It doesn't have to always be knock them down, drag them out, make them quit all the time, right? There's a time and a place for that we can continue to train people to a high level of performance, if not, I think, a higher level of performance, because they'll have greater mental clarity and better decision making, better responsiveness when they come to that endpoint of having to function, on the job with a high level of skill. That should be the goal of the training, not
And the
just making people puke for the sake of making them puke.
yeah, I'm thinking of the shouting boot camp instructor versus a special forces guy coming along and just teaching. You know, if I was teaching you how to shoot, it'd be completely different. I'm not sitting there yelling at you. Um, I love that you're talking about the athlete transition. When I talked to Professor Nick Gill, the strength and conditioning coach for the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team, he said
Love those guys, by the way.
yeah,
I
yeah,
have
aren't
an
they
All
great?
Blacks jersey, actually.
They, what I loved about what he said was the new guys coming in is they're going, right, Nick, what do I have to do now to add a couple of more years onto my playing career before I have to physically retire, or so I'm not as broken when I do retire? I love that these young guys are starting to look forward rather than I get into the team and that was the only goal.
Yeah, I mean, again, what good is it, having such a short tenure that you don't have a long-term impact,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
All this time, energy, and effort and resources been put into getting you there. How do I keep you there as long as possible? Get right, squeeze the juice out of this asset,
mm-hmm.
but then also make sure that they continue to be an asset on the other side. A high level operator, for instance, is just as valuable when they stop if their experience was a good one,
Yeah,
that they then want to continue passing their knowledge down,
yeah,
right? And think of
absolutely.
all the high level, very experienced, well trained guys and gals who will end up being excellent trainers and coaches and educators to pass that knowledge that will bring the next generation up faster and more efficiently.
Exactly. Exactly.
How
And
much more money would we save, right? If you want to put it in financial terms, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I was talking with Gary from Strongmen yesterday. We do a live stream every couple of weeks. And you know, I do the how not to die stuff. Unfortunately, people often come to me after they've been attacked. Um, he does mental let me see. He helps strong people, so the performing people, recover from a fall from grace, as it were. So mending strong people if they've gone through depressive incidents or just you know a blowout, like the CEO slept as a secretary and is losing all that money and losing position and so on. The I lost my train of thought there while I was talking about why Gary popped in my head. Um, um, you were talking about the operator afterwards. Oh,
That
so
they can pass
there
down
it's
their
a
knowledge, right?
yeah, so it's a cost benefit analysis. Literally, people before they come to see me or come to see him, he's a better example. Would you pay him $10,000 right now to get your mental state right? That's a cost. If you didn't, it was going to cost you $2 million in a divorce and losing your business. You would then. There's a cost
Right.
benefit analysis there immediately, and same for me. But I think that's super important as well. So what he said, and this is where it jumped in my head, a company that focuses on mental health in the workplace now before an incident happens, it's a sevenfold return. So every dollar they spend, they get $7 back, rather than the reverse, where you actually doing it in arrears. It's a lot worse cost benefit analysis. So same thing there mentally, as well as the operator or the policeman, 20-year policeman. You don't want to lose that knowledge. You want to use that as an instructor instead of him going, I never want to see a police station again, and you guys can go screw yourselves, you know?
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
all it does is start to create a pendulum effect that swings so hard and so heavy that you get to kind of where we're starting to get to now, right? Is a culture was continually perpetuated and created that you essentially lost waves and waves, volumes and volumes of really critical on the job experience that those guys want nothing to do with it now,
No,
right?
no.
For any given number of reasons. And luckily, right, we still have a lot of people who go, you know what, I have faith in this process. I want to teach other people to do it better. And those are the Pat Max and the Ronan, Two Lambs and these
Yeah.
guys who I got to interview as well. And guys like you who are willing to pass that knowledge on. And one of the other efforts that I wanted to really make sure that I went to was just seeing the lack of support that comes from the institutions themselves, the agencies themselves, and that goes to the very highest level ones,
Yeah.
um, and where it ultimately comes down to is money, and that's why I talk about that cost analysis, right?
Mm.
Is because that's one of the only ways to communicate with these guys, that these are services and and systems that need to be invested in, and we need to create a network and culture of people who are willing to share their experiential knowledge, are willing to learn from one another in the strength conditioning fields, the health and wellness fields, the nutritional fields, the high level tactical athlete performance
Mm.
fields, firearms instructors, hand to hand combat instructors, guys like Tony Blauer and guys like Tu Lam. There's a guy who has a fantastic knife fighting program called Libre Fighting. There's all these different people out there who are kind of working in their isolated little bubbles, but that network doesn't really truly exist yet, where you can go, if it was a website, for instance, who are all these people who operate at a high level in these categories? Can we find them and can we dispatch them to where they're needed so that we can get military, law enforcement, first responders of various kinds, the knowledge, the training, the experience, the tools that they need, at least from an internal perspective, on an individual basis, to be able to do their job, do it better, and continue doing it for a long time. And again, want to continue sharing that knowledge because they feel good enough, right? They
Yeah.
have the energy, and they have the desire to pay it forward and pass it on, where, that hasn't really been the case for the last probably 15, 20 years at least. So
No, you're right. But I love what you said there about longevity and the person continually getting better. Uh, and then I'm going to go to all the gear you got there and sum it up. But it makes me think of the officer who got shot in the head just the other day, responding to the bank shooter, the disgruntled worker who went into his workplace and started shooting people. You know, coaches, if you're listening to this, if you're a strength trainer, you ever get a chance to teach a cop, um, he may move the wrong way, he or she may move the wrong way, and he or she is going to die because he got a bullet in the head because he went the wrong way. He was not in the right place. His decision, sometimes you only get one chance.
yeah.
His decision, right or left or whatever it was incorrect for the situation. And really, coaches and trainers, again, if you're listening, or anybody that teaches these people that life is on the line, because it might not have been his life, he might have pulled the trigger on the wrong thing. Sometimes they have to make a response, a decision that can have some serious consequences. So it's important that they realize the implications. You clearly do, Daniel, which is phenomenal. And I love the organic way you look at the whole thing, which is brilliant. But I wanted to really bring out that point for the listeners that these people, if you're lucky enough to be able to teach them things, it's not just a chin up or getting bigger. You've got to think of the bigger picture, and it's super important. I just wanted to really get that out there. I'm sure I'm preaching the choir with you. I wanted to speak to you about all the gear you got, because we started off a little bit about that, and you got some cool stuff. And I thought, what a waste if I didn't ask you about some of your favorite things there. What are your favorite things, and what are you?
Oh, they're
What do you
all my
like?
favorite. I'm a giant fitness. I've said this a few times on other talks that I've done. Is that I had no idea, really, 3 years into this process, that I was probably some kind of a weird doomsday prepper for fitness, because that's really the way this whole thing happened. I was saying, I call this place the Noah's Ark of fitness,
Yeah.
and this is my little shop of horrors and my strange little zoo for for estranged fitness equipment. But what I love about each and every individual piece is that this is like my weird little, personally curated art gallery
Yes.
of products that have been invented and things that people have never even seen yet. Right. I've got prototypes in here that I'm the only person who's seen them. And that's such a cool experience for me. I'm a fitness nerd. I'm a training nerd, right? It comes down to the nuts and bolts for me, and I love it. Gets me excited about it. But really, again, that all stemmed from my desire to improve the efficiency and the efficacy of the training. And, to the wrong kind of practitioner, with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But you
Exactly.
can't really properly fix everything with a hammer, right? You can certainly find better tools to do that. And that's all another reason that I love Tactical is these guys really understand specific applications and purposes for specific tools, right down to the finest little detail of a design and what that can do to save your life.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to training, we have that same principle being applied, and seeing the way that all these different tools have found, one way or another, a specific purpose for helping somebody, whoever that person is, overcome a specific obstacle
Yes.
more efficiently, more effectively, coming on the other side of that, feeling more empowered in their own body again, because the tool gave them the necessary feedback and decreased the time required to get over the learning curve to use their body in a better way. There's so many of them. I'm sitting on one of them right now. Like I said, when this whole process really started, I was just looking to promote different products, educate on different products, because I saw a gap and in a niche that a lot of people weren't doing, which was to say, I'm a strength conditioning coach. I'm going to lend you, the product provider, my knowledge and essentially some level of scruples to your product to say, this is a thing that does these things and it does them really well. And here's where it fits into programming for all these different people. And I was halfway decent at getting in front of a camera and at least showing those things on Instagram. But again, what happened was over the course of about 3 years, I had amassed all this different stuff. And at that time, I was training at another facility right around the corner, which is really actually Iron Paradise Part 1. So the Rock's Iron Paradise,
Oh, wow.
that you see him using in his Under Armour, commercials and things like that. If you look closely, you'll see a flag with an eagle up on the walls in some of those Iron Paradise videos, Under Armour videos, and that's a facility called Rienzi Strength Conditioning. That facility is owned by Dave Rienzi, who is Dwayne Johnson's trainer. And I was renting from his facility for about 3 years in that process of growing kinetic training and coming up with all my concepts and things like that. And so once the pandemic came along, by that point, I had amassed quite a bit of stuff.
Yeah.
And luckily at that point, this is where the divine intervention side comes into things. I had just been gifted a trailer, fitness trailer that was customized for fitness, that had 2 squat racks on the side and one in the back, from a company called Mobile Fitness Equipment.
Yeah.
And they were actually one of the first companies that I purchased any product from to start my business, literally out of the back of my truck. What is now the Beaver Fit hitch fit system. You can see there that fits into a hitch.
Yeah.
The original version and iteration of this I bought to start my business, and literally started kinetic training out of the back of a truck. And so I had their trailer that, when about 6 months before COVID hit South Florida, quote unquote, hit, inexplicably came to South Florida. One of my clients had approached me about going out to this local farm that was right around the corner from the facility that I was training at and starting goat yoga classes. And I was like, well, I'm not a goat yoga. I'm not a yoga guy in general. I believe in stretching, but I'm not really a yoga guy. And I'm certainly not going to teach goat yoga. But I have all this crazy equipment. Why don't we start an outdoor fitness, health, and wellness facility on a farm that'll be, outdoors, fresh air, sunshine, and rainbows. It'll be a lot of fun. I'll train the coaches. They can use my equipment, and I'll just take a percentage of whatever this ends up being. So we came up with a lot of those concepts early on, approached the farmer, a gentleman named Robert Hoover, who owns this 15-acre farm that I'm on. And he said, yeah, cool. Let's talk about it. And so a couple months went by, we came up with names and logos, and, she took out an LLC on it. And about 2 weeks before COVID, now at that time in the gym, I was hearing whispers of, there's something going on in Italy and something going on in China. People are getting the sniffles, whatever is happening. We kind of think it might be a problem. 2 weeks later, March 17th, 2020, they literally told us we have to shut the gyms down. Everybody get out. You can't be in here anymore. So the day everybody else shut their gyms down in South Florida, I opened one up,
Awesome.
and that was on the farm. Out here in the muck and dirt. Oftentimes what you'll see now, is puddles all over the place and
Yeah.
rain. At the time, we didn't actually have any kind of roof over our head. At
Oh,
that time, we
wow.
just had the trailer. Yeah. No, we were literally out in the cow pasture, man. I can show you the videos from the original content I was creating when we first came out here. I had the trailer, and we literally started to lash together convention tents. And
Yep.
I was,
Yep.
tying them together with twist ties and whatever else to keep the water from dripping down into the facility. And then what we started to realize was that the weight was causing a bowl effect. So when it would rain, we'd be in literally like knee deep water. So we started lashing together the tops of picnic tables, and what created essentially a dojo floor, which is one of the reasons that I started calling an alternative name for this is the dojo, um, because we just need to get up out of the water. So
Yeah.
that went on from about March to October, when Robert finally built this structure, which is essentially about 1,000 square feet in total if you account for all the space, which was originally going to be a chicken coop. And we finally just said, look, we need a roof over our heads and a flat ground to work on here finally. So he luckily was generous enough to give us the space to work with, and I've been building out and customizing the sort of bits and pieces that I need to ever since. But the entire concept, but what I, behind what I originally was going for when I started kinetic training out of the back of the truck, was that I wanted all of my training and all of my tools to be mobile, deployable, efficient, effective, something that you could, take one object and build an
Yeah.
entire program around it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you could take all 50 of them and build a gym out of it.
Yeah.
And that's literally what happened. And then the crazy part about this mobile fitness company was that they were eventually, during that COVID time, purchased by a company named Beaver Fit. And if you're in the tactical space, you've probably heard of them to some extent, because they're currently, one of the biggest contractors other than Sorinex, making equipment specifically for the military fields and law enforcement fields. And they eventually bought that trailer. Interestingly enough, I had to send the trailer off to Beaverfit so that they could deconstruct it and make their new version of it. And right about that time, luckily I had my old mobile fitness hitch fit on the back of my truck. Some guy rear-ended me. I was sitting at a stoplight. He rear-ended me
Oh,
going
wow.
full blast downhill in the rain.
Oh,
And it was actually my hitch fit that saved my truck from being completely obliterated.
wow.
And interestingly enough, I was able to use the original invoice from my sale in 2017, to give it to my insurance company, and they had to reimburse me for that loss.
Yeah.
And that was exactly the amount of money that I needed, actually a little bit more than I don't know if I should say that publicly, like $30 more. I'll pay them back if I have to.
Yeah.
That I needed to purchase the equipment inside of the trailer. So these plates that you
Wow.
see here, these plates, these were the original plates that were inside of that trailer,
Yeah.
the barbell, things like that. So that's why I say, for me individually, spirituality and a sort of God-driven approach to life is really important. I haven't gotten to where I am without that. And I'm a firm believer in no luck-driven circumstances, and I've seen that repeatedly over and over again with so many of these situations. But the funny thing about that was I have a TikTok video I can send you of the moment that happened. I got rear-ended, and I went, you know what, guys, I'm not even gonna get mad. I know something good's gonna come out of this. I know it's gonna be
Yeah.
actually a good situation in the end, and that's exactly what happened. Um,
That's
Not
cool.
only did I get reimbursed on the trailer or on the equipment, but I took that same video, and Beaver Fit was generous enough to then, when they started making this new version of the Hitch Fit
Yeah.
rack system, they were kind enough to gift that to me because of
Oh,
the story that I told there and all that stuff. So
that's the
I mean,
beginning.
just really really crazy stuff, man. But for me, it boils down to a story of resilience, of being prepared to live kinetically, right? To have a mindset of rapid tactical response, and ultimately doing whatever it takes, and remaining of an open heart and open mind to navigate life according to what happens, and just and do it with an understanding that things are going to be all right, as long as you continue trying to do the right thing by people, and do the next best thing, at least when the time comes. So that's how I've gotten to where I am with all this stuff, man, and it's been a wild ride. I cannot complain.
I love it. You're very driven, passionate, but humble as well. And if the listeners haven't picked up on that already, I'll just highlight that. Humility, I think, can often be defined as open to learning, to step in the ego aside. You clearly know a lot of stuff, but you're ready to learn. I mean, you went to learn from the guys that did the RPR, all those sort of things. And it's super important, because I could sit on my laurels and go, I'm a Czech qualified guy. I was one of the first personal trainers in the world. We started personal training at Les Mills in New Zealand, franchise personal training. There's no such thing. I could stand on my laurels, but let's be real, that's like 30 or 40 years ago. And I get programming. I get programming.
The cool thing about what Paul has done is he's been a continual proponent for lifelong learning, and it's because of guys like him who stayed in it, who didn't get jaded by the fitness industry, and there's a bunch of others out there who we could list names all day, who made a concerted effort to continue learning, to continue growing, to remain humble, and keep trying to push those around them to have a mindset of excellence and keep growing, right? And that's what really matters. That's what makes any of us and all of us better as human beings. So yeah, I totally agree with you, man. If you learn anything from watching this podcast, guys, keep learning.
I love it. I must connect you. I've got notes of a few people to connect you with, but just thinking there is Brian Hennessy, and being American, you might have remembered him from back in the day, being a footballer. Really amazing story, but he invented the Squat Max MD and also the Henny attachment.
Oh yeah, very familiar with it.
Yeah, nicest guy. But I must connect you with the Squat Max MD, and the reason I'm saying
he's got the Henny attachment too, right?
The Henny attachment, it's beautiful. But he's continually learning. He could go, I'm this amazing athlete. He's learning now from exercises he's developing with it, and exercises other people are developing with those devices. And it's beautiful to see a 50 plus man who was, as a professional athlete and professional coach, continue learning, which is a sign of greatness, I believe. I'm going to connect you with Mr. EMG. I'd like to see if we can get one of the best EMG devices sent over to you to maybe measure what's going on as well. And also you mentioned about the network of people. There's not quite yet a network. There are in the tactical world, and there's a couple of people. Michael Novito does the A-Elite U. Jason Sustoff does Swamp Fox Tactics, but these guys seem to have a network of people. So for instance, A-Elite U, you got jiu-jitsu guys, you got special forces shooters, and you're going to get nutrition, you're going to get fitness all around that. So they're starting to see, as you said with the special forces guys, they down to the most minute detail, they're starting to see that let's get this all out there to others and get that knowledge transfer going, which is super important. Daniel, I'll connect with those guys offline, and we've done it at the start with the intro prior to our interview, but where do people go and find out more about you and what you do?
When it comes down to that, really the best portfolio that I've got really is Instagram, but my website is Live Kinetically. My Instagram handle is Live Kinetically. You'll see a lot of different stuff on there, and I hope it never comes off as me just constantly trying to sell stuff. I genuinely use this stuff every single day in my own training and, with my personal training clients. And it's only because I've done just ridiculous amounts of personal testing and guinea pig testing. My clients, I often call my test subjects, jokingly. But yeah, Instagram and my website, Live Kinetically. And then, anyone who wants to is always welcome to reach out either there or via email. All my contact information is readily available there. So I'm always happy to talk and chat as much as I can possibly with with anyone who's willing to be educated and have an open mind for learning some of this stuff. And yeah, man, it's been a real honor and pleasure to spend this time with you, brother. I'm excited to see where we go from here as well. Just beyond one conversation that can always lead to more things, man. So happy to
For
be
sure.
here.
Oh, and same back at you. Appreciate, I reached out to you and good people helping other good people. Uh, Thank you for your kind response on Insta, and thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I've loved chatting with a non-operator, which is great. But you got that operator mindset. It's instilled, and it really shows through. Man, I've got a bunch of show notes here, absolutely phenomenal things you've talked through. I'm excited to go and research some of these things myself. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, and check out my new project for 2023 at hownottodie.com.au, where I've combined all my Special Forces training and police officer experience to help others. Thanks for watching.